Oh, well, hello everybody. I am still F Zappa 20. Why not follow up a fish recap talking about the trial of Richard Allen out of Delphi, Indiana? And this one I may need some help on. Unlike the Buckeyes and Browns videos, I should just sneak those in too. Make this a real Renaissance channel. But this one here, this case is something there's real problems in the case. I suppose we should start with the actual problems now. And the number one being right now at the trial is there's no public access with cameras or even audio, not daily transcripts. There are a handful of members of the public getting in and some media. But then that leads you to, well, then who do I watch? Who do I listen to? Then it's just like everything else. You don't know. These people are trying their best, but in most cases, they're not experts. I try to bounce around to as many different sources as I can, but at the same time, acknowledging these people, this is not necessarily what they're always cut out for. And then you just see and hear so many different things. You wish you were like, wow, I wish I could watch or hear or somehow see this myself, to really decide. Of course, none of us, myself, and anybody that happens to see this, none of us are jurors. So I guess ultimately it doesn't matter here. But we would like to know, especially if you have been following the case all the way back since the Down the Hill days. So I don't know. Like I said, I've been watching or listening to 6 or 7 different sources almost daily. Sometimes they get so long you can't listen to all of them every day. And some of these people for years have been at it. And some of them, it's clearly just not their thing. But they're still trying to give you some information. So maybe if you have any sources, let me know who the people are, because they say there's like somewhere in between 15 to 30 people there reporting on it. I believe between actual media and just public folks trying to give us what they can. And there's been a lot of great stuff come out of that. And then the second biggest problem would be, as a person who is accused but not yet convicted, he has been in a prison and not a jail. That obviously is an unusual circumstance. I hear what the state is saying, public safety, his own safety, yada, yada, yada. But then at one point there was a county jail, not Carroll County, but there was a county jail in Indiana that said, look, we don't want to keep him, but we will. And they chose not to. They chose to keep him in the prison at that time. So then those two things have led to all sorts of problems, in which, sometimes I'm guilty, sometimes I'm not guilty. Sometimes it's like kind of guilty. I wish I had more information. I'm about to hit pause. All right, so I think I covered the two things that I think are just not right. That's just not right. And so should we move on to guilty? Not. We'll start with the kind of guilty, but then this is like almost not even worth bringing up because there is no cameras, no audio, no transcripts, no pictures, no video. Even controversial what they are showing within the court. Some stuff is shown to the public, some is not, some only the jury gets to see. So then that leads us to the confessions. Obviously, I'd really like to see those myself. Some of those I think I can toss out right away, just based on behavior and things that are said within and around the actual confessions. But there are a few that seem dicey that I would like to see and hear. Some that seem like they came a little earlier before things got really out of hand. And then, again, that's where the problem of being in a prison becomes a problem. Now, I don't know if things would have been any better in a county jail as far as conditions go. Him being in isolation as opposed to general population, I think was actually the right call. But then being in isolation becomes a problem. But then there was many accusations that he was faking it. Again, I'd like to see that for myself. And then I don't want juror reactions, I'm glad that the jurors got to see it at least, though. That is the important thing, I'll acknowledge. So the confessions are in the kind of guilty area, but I can't even really say for sure, other than the fact that there's so many of them. What I've heard reported from like 7 different people makes me think a few of them were decent confessions. And then the fact that on the video, Libby saw a gun, mentions a gun. They say the actual quote was, "That be a gun." But I believe it was most likely Libby saying, "Abby, a gun." So we'll have to see. Again, I'd like to hear it myself. I probably wouldn't even be able to decipher it either. But most likely, I would think it's Libby saying Abby. And then, not that be. And he did own a firearm, of course. And then that leads us to the bullet, which, as far as the markings, I'm not so carried away with those. But he did own a gun that cartridge would match. It wasn't like a shotgun shell or anything like that. It would actually match the one that he owned. And he did own one then. Not everyone does. Now, I know it seems to be very common, obviously, here in the United States. But not every man owns a gun. So the fact that he did and that it was even a possibility is sort of in that, okay, this is circumstantial, but that is something there. And then, so then let's move on to guilty or not guilty. Let's move over to then not the not guilty stuff is the fact that there was no DNA found. Now, it was outdoors. It was in the woods. And then I think about the only other case I've paid much attention to recently is the Brian Koberger case in Idaho with the 4 students. That happened. He goes indoors quickly with not a lot of chance at all to clean up. Barely left any DNA at all. So it obviously can happen. I mean, you just figured that would have been littered with his DNA. Turns out it was not. They barely found a little bit of DNA. So in this case, the fact that they didn't find any is, it's surprising, but also not unheard of. And it was outdoors. I mean, there could have been a leaf laying around somewhere with some of his DNA, but how many hundreds of thousands of leaves there were? I mean, the crime scene started all the way, well, it is a big crime scene. And the fact that yes, he had all these weapons, but they didn't necessarily have like a lock solid, that's the weapon, so that's kind of would lean me towards the not guilty thing. It would be hard to convict on that, but then when you start to stack the circumstantial stuff and then the stuff that's really, really damning against him, I believe, like very early on, the stuff that we learned, and I still just kind of maybe is my number one, is that he says he was there. He describes himself almost exactly as Bridge Guy. And everybody talks about how warm it was that day. Why were you dressed that way? I mean, what's up with the Carhartt on an unusually warm day? So that's pretty damning. You can see he was walking, he was looking at fish, he was looking at stocks, whatever, I'm sure. And then the fact that he ditched the 2017 phone is pretty bad. He has all of these devices, but that one goes missing. That's a little sus. Maybe not, I would compare that to the DNA thing. Like no DNA kind of makes you think, he didn't leave any DNA. That's a little sus. The fact that he got rid of that device and he still had all these other devices is a little sus. Now, some people say phones, some people say devices. If it were 17 phones that he had, and that's the only missing one, or 32, or whatever the number was, 21, I'm imagining it was devices, though. Either way, and I do have a handful of devices around here. Occasionally I do, but I also have my phones forever. I've only had like 4 smartphones ever since, some people are on their 40th probably. He admitted that the car in the picture was his. That's one thing that I was like, ooh, I'd like to see the picture of that car. But then during one of the interrogations, he was like, yeah, sure, that's my car, but I told you I was there. So, and then speaking of vehicles, he says he saw Brad Weber on his driveway around the time that would make sense. Now, does seem to be some dispute what's reported as far as the timeline there. Oh, and then his timeline changes. That's also damning. I know there has been, obviously, the defense has really hammered home that some of the things law enforcement has changed, which is normal. But then, boy, that's awful convenient. He tried to change that timeline. Not a lot from his story changes, but that one did. All right, so that's about all I got, And like I said, I've been trying to watch, I know I watch a lot of Lawyer Lee. I watch a lot of Lauren. I watch some Tom Webster. Oh, poor Tom Webster. Tom Webster and Murder Sheet. I don't know if this is necessarily their best thing. Tom specifically, he's great at when he's got his charts and he's got a month to work on things. But going live, I don't know if it's his best work. He's trying his ass off, though. So I thank him for all of that. Andrea Burkhart I've tuned into. Kind of bailed on Court TV, WHTR. So these are just all the people I'm watching. Is there someone else out there that you're like, oh no, man, this person has the deets? Hate to bail. Well, I think old Tom Webster might have bailed anyhow. So I don't mean to diss him, but I just feel like he was struggling, to get through his own notes at times. Lauren's pretty good at this. Lawyer Lee's pretty good at this. Burkhart, I don't know how I feel about her, but she's good at what she's doing. Kind of like the defense. I don't know how I feel about those guys, but they're good at what they're doing. McClellan, I don't know how I feel about that guy. Now, Judge Gall, I'm no judge. I don't know. I don't know anything, but come on. Can I really say she's good at what she's doing? A lot of people have some questions about old Judge Gall, huh? So I guess we will. It's not over yet. I won't be shocked if it's hung. I won't be shocked at any outcome, really. But so that's where I lie. Boom, boom, boom. As in lie on a bed. Unlike Barbara McDonald, not that kind of lie. I think old Babs, I loved her, man. Big Babs fan until we find out the truth about the cartridge. How dare you lie to us, Babs. Vinny, get her in. All right, boom, we're out of here.